Hi, Karen here. How are you? So I thought I'd take the opportunity to answer a question that someone wrote to me a while ago. And as usual, I didn't write down who it came from. I think I got it off one of the comments on YouTube. So it's a great question. I'm going to read out what she said because it's great. She says, "Hi Karen, I'm new to your channel and I'm loving watching all your videos and interviews. One thing I've always struggled with is the idea of contrast being pre-planned from our soul's perspective. I've been listening to Abraham, that's the Abraham Hicks material, for many years and have greatly benefited from their teachings. And I know that they say everything we experience is in our picturing of our thoughts, beliefs, and vibration. That the idea of negative events being inevitable is not so. And yet other teachers, channelers, seem to say the opposite. What are your thoughts on this? I can't say I like the idea of certain things being fated, but I'm curious how you reconcile the two." And she says, "Anywho, I love your energy and thanks for all you share with us." It's a great question. And I'm sorry I can't remember. I didn't write down what your name is. I'm terrible like that. Let's have a look at the Abraham material. So the one thing that Esther says with pretty much every event that she does, or Abraham says through Esther, is, "Are you enjoying the contrast?" And then people go, "Yes." And she says, "Liars." So the thing is that as souls, we come from a realm of pure positive energy. And then we insert ourselves into a third dimensional experience like the earth experience to experience what has been deemed as contrast, the contrast to the pure positive energy. Because when we come from realms of purely positive energy, we can't experience what it's like to have the contrast of that because it's not available to us. So we insert or we take on human lives or lives in density. It doesn't always have to be human because there are many different multidimensional experiences where we can experience contrast, or as stated in the law of one material, it's called distortion. And he calls pretty much everything that's not unconditional love distortion because the source is pure positive energy. So anything that is not of pure positive energy is a distortion from the source. And we are creating our lives from two perspectives, well, from many perspectives really, but to make it simple for our linear brains to wrap our minds around, we're creating our lives from a soul's perspective. And then as we insert our consciousness into a third dimensional reality and we take on a body and a personality, we create the personality or the ego. We're creating from this perspective too. And so, yes, we are creating our reality, but we're creating it from many perspectives. Abraham doesn't talk too much, or not that I've not heard them speak for many years. They might be speaking more about it now, but they don't talk too much about soul planning, as you've stated here, that we create the contrast being pre-planned. But they do talk about the benefit of the contrast that we live. So in order to know more fully what pure positive energy or what love is like, when we experience the opposite of it, we have a better understanding, not the right word, we have a better experience of it. Okay. This is the analogy they're giving me, food. Trust them to give me a food analogy. So imagine that you only eat a certain amount of food that you like, you really like it, and that's all you've ever eaten in your life. And then you go to another country and you eat food that you really don't like. You really don't like it. So you come home and you eat your favorite food again. Doesn't that food taste so much better now that you've experienced what was not it? And something that you didn't like? So the experience of the food was not appreciated or of benefit to you as much when you just had it all the time and you only knew that. So in order to really know something from a new perspective, from a more appreciative perspective, is to experience the opposite. And that's why we insert ourselves into experiences like planet Earth, where we can experience the contrast to pure positive energy. So we do some planning sessions before we get here, and we sort out, some of the things that we're going to experience. I want to experience love in a way like forgiveness. Forgiveness is experiencing love in a way that you can't experience when you're only swimming in pure positive energy. So in order to do that, somebody has to do something to you so that you can forgive them. So you might plan that out with another soul. You might say, do this terrible thing to me, rip me off, leave me, I don't know, do something to me so that I'll need to forgive you. And then in forgiving you, I'm going to experience love like I've never experienced it before. It's like another image that they're giving me. It's like watching people at airports. When someone's there living with you all the time, it's like they're nice and you like them and you appreciate them. But when they go away for a while, I'm getting the images of like men that are going to war. And that still happens because there's still war on our planet. I've got a couple of brothers who work in the military, and one of my brothers goes away and his wife is at home with the little children. And when he comes back, how much more do you appreciate him after he's been away? Especially, he's not putting in too much danger, but especially if somebody that you love goes away and they're in some sort of danger like war, you worry about them, you love them even more. And when they come back, the joy of that reunion and that embrace and that love is so much greater than if they'd been in your face just walking around your living room every day. So the contrast has created this exceptional experience. And that's what we do as souls. We create these exceptional experiences through contrast. So I hope I've answered your question. I'm listening to Abraham for many years. And I greatly benefit from their teachings, experience thoughts through our vibrations. So she's saying, how do we create if we're creating through our thoughts and beliefs and vibration? So what we're doing in our creative process is, because time exists simultaneously in different realms, what we actually do when we align our energy is that we have created scenarios, probable realities, parallel realities if you like, but probable realities have been created even before we get here on planet Earth. There's sort of scenarios that have been created. I could take that route on that, timeline, that timeline. And what we do when we're incarnate in physical bodies is we're aligning with different timelines. So according to the vibration and the thoughts that you have and the beliefs that you have, you will align with different timelines. I think I've spoken about this on the show before. Someone could go to a psychic and they could be in a particular trajectory of thought. I remember, when I first started the show many years ago, I started with a psychic medium called Pam, who used to do predictive type things. I don't, with my psychic ability, do predictive type things, although I can if it's really strong coming through. But we had this caller on the line that was having some money problems. And she didn't tell him on the line, but when he hung up, she said, that guy's going to lose his house, he's going to lose his job, he's going to lose his house, he's got some big trouble coming up. And I said, why didn't you tell him? She said, oh, no, I didn't want to give him that bad news. And I said, well, so my teaching is very different to a psychic who just predicts the future. I'm somebody who helps people align their energy. I'm somebody who teaches deliberate creation. So if you do look down a particular timeline and you see that someone is in alignment with that particular timeline, you can actually show them how not to manifest that particular timeline. So these people who are all worried about money and the future, and their worry put them on that trajectory of finding more things to be worried about, like losing his job and then losing the house. You can ask them to shift their vibration and start appreciating what they have, and start doing like an appreciation journal, or shifting their beliefs and shifting their vibration, and they might create a completely different timeline. He might lose his job, but before he's even lost his job, there's a better job that's been lined up for him that's paying him 3 times more money. And so they don't lose the house. Look, anything is possible. And then again, maybe losing the house and losing the job is a way of bumping them into that appreciation that they're not doing, because they're so busy worrying about their life and the future that sometimes when the proverbial shift hits the fan, as what's happening with humanity, and everything goes wrong, we stop and take stock and start thinking, how can I shift this in earnest? And then we start looking at how we think. We might start, thinking about being more deliberate in how we're creating our lives, instead of just bipping along with this habitual pattern of just getting up, going to work, hating a job, coming home, screaming at the kids, making dinner, whatever. So it all works out in the end, whether you create a bad or a good future in front of you, it's all there to serve us. And the contrast is such an important way that we learn about who we are as genius, creative, deliberate creators. It very often takes a huge amount of contrast to knock us out of our habitual belief patterns and start to ask different questions and look at life differently. I remember when I had my shop, I had a furniture and homeware shop, and there was a fire in the shop, and I had kicked my husband out. I had a small baby. I'm doing worry really well. I'm like an expert at worry. And then life gave me something else to worry about. 4 o'clock in the morning, I'm in the shop with the fire brigade and my sister-in-law, and she had called some people to help me. And it was at that moment of this contrast that I was thinking, I'm not alone. I'm not doing it all alone. Look, there are these people that are in my shop at 4 o'clock in the morning helping me clean up the mess. And I started to look at life differently, instead of going, oh, woe's me, poor me, I'm all alone, I'm doing it all alone, and sort of telling this story over and over to myself and stressing myself out. This great contrast made me stop and start to appreciate in different ways. And it was a beautiful thing. It was a terrible thing and a beautiful thing. What happened was, it was really interesting. It was something else to worry about. I had to shut the shop and clean it up, and I wasn't making money as I shut the shop. But I was insured. And the insurance man came to the shop. It wasn't a big fire, so it was really just smoke damage. And he was walking around the shop saying, oh, that looks damaged, and that looks damaged, and that looks damaged. And I'm going, no, it doesn't. That's all right. I can still sell that. And he's like looking at me and writing on his little pad, and he goes, no, it looks damaged to me. And I'm going, I'm arguing with him. No, it's not. It's fine. What he was trying to do, he was trying to help me. He was trying to help me get the insurance money. It would be like making a sale. If I said, oh, yes, that's damaged, well, then the insurance was going to pay me, the cost of the item, and it would be like giving me the money that I, needed. And I didn't think about it at the time. I realized after he had left that he was really trying to help me without being blatant about it. And so there is so much help around, even if it comes from insurance people. And I did get a bit of a payout from the insurance, which did help me buy more stock and keep the business going. And so the drama was actually a good thing in the end. It was a drama, being woken up by the police in the middle of the night and having to, as I said, I'd kicked my husband out at that stage, so I had to find someone to look after the baby and all that sort of thing. But in the end, it was actually a big wake-up call and a great lesson, and it all turned out well. So do we plan these things before we get here? Maybe not something like that. I think that we kind of create that. I definitely know that my worry was creating that, but at the same time there was help. But we do plan the bigger things, like we might plan marriages and divorces, and we might plan illnesses. Definitely deaths are... There are agreements made before we get here when somebody leaves the planet. Definitely. In our little tribe, there have been quite a few people who have lost husbands and children, and definitely things like that are planned before we get here. I'm going to be a spiritual teacher, and I'm going to come down to earth and experience what it is to be human, and then understand death, that there is no death, and so somebody I love is going to transition, and from the other side I'll keep that contact, and then I'll have like an angel on the other side or a spirit on the other side who I personally know from having been with them in the physical, and they'll help me understand that there is no death, because I'll keep the lines of communication open. So agreements like that are definitely made. So while we're living our lives, Do we see the contrast or the dramas as terrible things that we don't want to happen to us? I think she says here, I can't say the idea of certain things being fated is something that she wants, but you know, those terrible things that happen to us, that contrast is such an amazing way to learn and grow. And it doesn't seem logical to want terrible things to happen to you. But just like Esther would say at the beginning of all her sessions, are you enjoying the contrast? Maybe start to look at the contrast as something to be enjoyed, as something to be appreciated, as something not to worry or be, you know, trepidation about. So we're going through contrast as a human race. We're going through huge amounts of contrast with the pandemic and the lockdowns and the, oh, who knows what's to come. You know, Australia's been through its fair share of contrast this year with the Australian fires and the floods and then the pandemic and the lockdowns. Can we enjoy the ride and not be too worried or fearful about it, and see how we're growing and expanding and learning through the contrast? We live in this polarized, contrasting environment. Love it, because you do love it when you're a soul. So donning that higher perspective is being up for it, is being game to experience all that life has to offer. And much of it is contrasting to the pure positive energy that we come from, that we experience when we return to love. As I've said in my book called Return to Love, we don't need to die to return to love. We can return to love while we're embodied, and it makes a much more enjoyable life as we are experiencing love for all of it. Just like I said in my show with Shirley Batty, or she said to me, she was saying love was the most important message that all her ET guides and spirit guides had told her. But loving all of it, loving the contrast, loving the evil people because they're souls too, and having that perspective of seeing the divine in everything, that unconditional love. That's when you create mastery in your life, when you have unconditional love. There is no condition in which you cease to love. You can see love, or you can see the divine in everything. So I hope that answers your question, and big love to all of you, and thank you so much for watching the shows and watching my little, you know, bits to camera. My guides keep saying do more of these. So send me your questions if you have questions, and I'll do more of them, because I always get on camera and think, what am I going to talk about? But when someone sends me a question, I've got something to talk about, so it's great. And love you all. Speak to you soon. Bye for now.